Welcome to the Women in Wealth podcast, brought to you by Regina McCann-Hess, a certified financial planner with over 2 decades of experience. This show is for professional women who want guidance in working towards their retirement vision in learning, building, planning, striving for your dreams, and putting the work in now so that you can pursue your financial independence. So today we're going to learn about not just co-parenting, but step parenting, which is something that many people do, but not a lot of people have guidance on. Hello, I'm Regina McCann-Hess, president of Forge Wealth Management, and welcome to our Women in Wealth series. Today I have a new friend with me, and Maria, can you tell us who you are, what you do, and what you love about what you do?
Thank you for having me, Regina. Yes, my name is Maria Natapov. I am a co-parenting and step-parenting coach, and I'm also a facilitator of rapid resolution therapy, which is a little confusing because I'm not a clinician, but it is an alternative modality that's quite powerful that I utilize in my work. What I do, I support families to create operational systems, workable operational systems. And by that, I mean it really centers around communication, right? Exchange of information, shared decision making, and creating a true foundation that is workable for everybody and creates safety and stability and considers everybody's needs, which, as one can probably imagine, can look like a whole host of different ways depending on what's happening for the family. I think that is the beautiful opportunity that is frequently available, that is kind of an overseen, perhaps positive benefit sometimes in many cases during a separation or divorce, right? It frequently points to some things that were in the foundation that weren't sustainable, perhaps, or that led to the breakdown. And I think that when we consider rebuilding, thinking about how can we build a more solid, effective foundation that feels nurturing and truly supportive for everybody, the adults as well as the kids, then that can really become a beautiful thing for the next chapter for everybody involved.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I have to imagine it's very difficult as the step parent to come into that relationship because there's all sorts of barriers that are being thrown up there. And how do you navigate that? And how do you make it a healthy relationship when you're kind of climbing it uphill?
Yes, it can be for sure. I think it definitely can be. I for sure made mistakes when I was a step parent, right? Like, in spite of being a child in an extremely contentious divorce who grew up with step siblings and step parents when I was granted later in my teen years and into my adulthood, you would have thought that I would know what not to do and what to do. And despite, I certainly did acquire some of that for sure throughout my experience. And I do think I developed some good instincts around that. And nonetheless, it's so nuanced, right? Relationships in general and family dynamic is so nuanced. There's so many layers and considerations and things that are happening within that ecosystem, especially post a separation and divorce when there's young kids involved. It's impossible to predict all the things. And frequently, the skills involved are largely undefined. They exist everywhere in many different facets of our lives, but they're largely undefined. And there's not a one-stop shop that I've known of, and I've searched high and low until more recently, which I found in the framework I now teach parents, as well as step parents and co-parents. There has not been a one-stop shop to acquire those skills. And those skills involve things that we're likely all familiar with. It's how do we not self-abandon? How do we stay true to ourselves? How do we, on the one hand, advocate for ourselves, but not add to the conflict? Many parents I meet are telling me the only way that I know how to reduce the conflict is to appease it, meaning just say yes and placate it, or to avoid it. And neither of those are sustainable because they frequently lead to resentment, burnout, or it's like a pressure cooker that is constantly building the pressure. So that's not sustainable because we know if that doesn't have a place to go, it's just going to erupt. And so that's frequently what happens for many of us because, as I said, these are skills technically all of us need to be utilizing daily in our relationships, but very rarely acquire and actually have a way that we are taught those skills that is accessible and repeatable and sustainable. So that's really what I love most about my work. I know this is a little bit of a roundabout way to answer your first question,
Mhm.
but
That's good.
that I get to, yeah, support parents in creating that and setting their kids up with those skills for their future relationships as well, because kids, um, the blueprint that they acquire for all of their interactions, positive, negative, how to handle conflict is frequently from what they are observing and that from their parents and caregivers.
Yeah. And, I was just thinking about that as you were talking about it. Like, I was never given a playbook for how to be a parent. And, you kind of learn on the go, but, you have all those years because you start with an infant and, you kind of grow into it and learn on the go. But still, it's a shame there's not like really good parenting classes that we can all take and have real life experience before we have our own little guinea pigs, right? And we are all drawing on our own memories of our own childhood and how we were parented. And that can go both ways. Like, I will never treat my kids that way, or I had such a great upbringing. I want to make sure my kids have that same type of upbringing. So, you
Right.
can lean into it or lean away from it,
Right.
which I think can be helpful.
Absolutely. And what the other interesting layer to what you just described, and I 100% agree with you, is actually sometimes you could say, well, that's how I was raised. Meanwhile, we're clear we didn't love that experience, but we're not realizing then maybe it's time for me to use some different skills
Mm,
with my kids, given it didn't feel so great or it didn't work out so well for me. It didn't feel necessarily so supportive or nurturing or necessarily giving me everything I maybe needed in
right.
some of those stages. So, yeah, to your point, I think another piece that's frequently overlooked is how do we navigate and handle our own emotions? And I know emotions it's kind of a bit of a loaded topic because we tend to societally um, label emotions. Some are good and some are bad, when in reality, they are a map. They are information about how our body is responding and what is needed and what feels safe or perhaps doesn't. So, those emotions we tend to label in a negative fashion are actually just our body letting us know some need is not being met right now. And something
Mhm.
about this is demanding our attention.
Yeah.
That's literally all that it is. So when we have that not only understanding, but we can identify what's underneath this emotion that is that need. What is this pointing to that I need to tend to? We now have insights and an opportunity to meet that need ourselves. Whereas frequently, without that understanding, we may be without even being aware of it, looking for others outside of ourselves or circumstances to change to meet those needs for us. And that's where we can kind of get into trouble. And that's
Hmm.
where things can come out sideways because we're frustrated. And again, it's really all about an unmet need that we can step into our own empowerment and meet ourselves.
Right, right. And kind of going back to adding that layer into the step parenting because you haven't raised that child from a baby. You don't know really how they were parented. And then you're coming in blind and a
Right.
completely different style of parenting, which could again be good or bad, but it's different from what that child's used to and could be automatically rejected because of that.
Yeah, there's that. There's also a frequent misunderstanding, and I again was totally guilty of it. That I'm coming in and I am in a parenting role because I'm not. I'm a step parent, which means certain caregiving responsibilities, maybe if they're available,
Mhm.
but maybe not if they're not available. And it is a tricky notion. The listeners may have heard of the concept of overstepping, which
Mhm.
is very real. And sometimes, as a step parent, it truly does feel like you can't get it right no matter what you do, because either you're accused of under showing up or or overstepping. But it is a really important consideration. And where it's critical is for the child. Everything
Mm.
does come down to the child because they are, number one, an innocent party to all of this. They had no voice, they had no say, they didn't choose any of this. And that is important. The
Yeah.
other piece is we have a responsibility because they are still developing. Their brains are developing, their skills are developing with how to navigate it. They are holding a lot and frequently too much, and many, many times they don't let on. And it is the adult's responsibility to have that understanding so that they can support those kiddos in navigating all of this weight that they're frequently holding, including there's frequently loyalty binds where they're feeling pulled to, you know, take care of the emotions of their adult caregivers. And it introduces all kinds of conflict for them when new partners are introduced because, well, what does this mean? If I like daddy's new girlfriend, does it mean I'm betraying mom, etc.? There's just so much. I don't want to take up too much time to identify all of it that they're frequently holding, especially if there's parental conflict that they're feeling. And even if the parents are saying and doing everything right, they might feel it in the energy. That's very nuanced, and kids are attuned to it like no other because they just have a higher sensitivity, I think, to notice those things. And so I think it's really important to recognize what is going to be best for that child, including how can the new caregiver stepping into this equation not introduce too much change all at once and not become like there's a new boss in the kitchen and now there's too many cooks in the kitchen, right? So
Oh, yeah.
all
Yeah.
of these are really important considerations and they require communication, understanding, and structure frequently to make it work.
Wise advice. Wise advice. Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about the therapy that you're working on, that project that you're working on. Tell us a little bit about
Yes.
that.
So, rapid resolution therapy is an additional service that I provide that is separate from the co-parent coaching. It's unique, and what I love about it is it's extremely quick acting, as the name suggests, rapid. What it really gets to the heart of is, and the kind of view that it takes, is that any and all of our thoughts, feelings, and emotions are from some sort of a traumatic experience or series of events. And trauma, I know, is a buzzword, but just to demystify it for all of us and put it into context, a traumatic event is when our system is overwhelmed and doesn't have the full range of skills needed to process something as it's happening, nor to navigate and or respond to it effectively as it's happening. It's just something that feels a little out of reach, like a little
Hmm.
too much outside of our roles and responsibilities, if you will.
Hmm.
And so that can send the system into overwhelm. And that can look like a variety of things, but essentially, whatever gets hardwired in that moment is, well, when we did these things, we survived and didn't die. Therefore, we're going to enact this protocol again anytime anything remotely similar is happening, which, as
Oh.
you can understand, isn't always effective, but that's the default that gets kind of coded, if you will. So, in rapid resolution therapy, those events, like if somebody's experiencing, for example, depression or anxiety, or maybe panic attacks, or maybe they have these intrusive, invasive like flashbacks, right, that bring on all kinds of things. Through this work, our perspective is that it is our subconscious, our fight, flight, freeze response, our survival response being activated to get the event to not have happened
Hmm.
back in time, right? Like,
Yeah.
and none of us have a time machine, I'm guessing. I'm just assuming wild shot in the dark. So we can't actually go back in time and prevent that event from having happened or series of events. And so it's about how do we help our whole organism get the good news that there's no threat so that it stops activating a survival response, essentially.
Wow.
And so the way we do that is we help to connect what we consciously know, right? The way that you and I are exchanging information that's in our logical mind and our conscious mind, our executive functioning, it's in our cerebral cortex, which is the newer kind of aspect of our brain that is developed as Homo sapiens. The primitive mind is what we have in common with, animals and more primitive life forms. And that is where our survival response lives. They don't do a good job of talking to each other because it's sort of like trying to connect a contemporary MacBook Air like latest technology to like a very, very old like computer from maybe the 80s, right? Like
Mm,
we may figure out how to do that, but it doesn't work all too well, right?
mhm, mhm,
And so that's kind of akin to that as far as an analogy. And so the way we access the subconscious is through storytelling and analogy. So when we have a conversation that incorporates both of those facets, we can help the subconscious mind recognize and understand that there's no threat. Once we bring that, or also any sort of perhaps beliefs we've acquired that we don't consciously believe, but they were just sort of coded in from childhood. Because under the age of about 7 or 8, we're in what's called a low grade hypnosis,
mm,
where we're just indiscriminately taking in information. So, again, for example, back to the survival mechanism, if we are seeing an adult who is alive and well and ultimately functioning, maybe not in the best way, but functioning, but maybe they have some maladaptive behaviors. Maybe they are screaming a lot. Maybe they are using substances at such an early age, we're not saying, okay, well, I want to behave like this person, but I don't like the substance use, so I'm not going to do that. We're just indiscriminately taking it all in, saying, well, they're surviving and they're much older than me. So I'm going to do whatever they're doing because that will help me to ensure I survive because
mm.
I want to reach that older age as well. And that's a rudimentary explanation of how that works.
Okay.
So as we're absorbing everything like true sponges, that's where some of those beliefs maybe get hardwired in, but consciously, when we finally have an ability to choose and we have that discerning thinking, we may not choose that. We may not be in agreement with that. And sometimes those two things, because they're in opposition, are causing a conflict within us that we may be aware of or perhaps are not aware of. But it's still causing something that is feeling like a form of stuckness, where the energy wants to go elsewhere, but keeps kind of getting caught in this cycle. So those are the things that I call it ironing out, if you will,
Mhm.
through this conversation because we're connecting the subconscious to the conscious mind.
Wow,
Um,
that's fascinating. Very fascinating. So, if people want to learn more about you, your process, what you're doing, where do they go to find that information?
yeah, they're always welcome to email me at Maria at synergistic step parenting. There's two P's in that.com. Or I'm also on LinkedIn at Maria Natapov or on Facebook at Maria Natapov. You're welcome to DM me. Yeah.
That's awesome. Awesome. Throughout your career, we've all faced challenges. What's a challenge that you faced as a professional woman?
That's such a great question. I think, and I guess maybe this is woman related, maybe it's not, but I think for a long time I was looking for permission, right? Like I thought I had to stay small and play small and stay in my lane. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so that has been a big one, and realizing just how deeply that runs and to what degree I have to untangle all of that has been a fascinating journey and definitely the most incredible opportunity for growth that I have ever experienced in my life. And I've done many things in my life that have challenged.
Yeah, I like that. I like that answer.
Yeah, thank
Okay,
you.
now let's get in a time machine and say, your vision of retirement. When it's time, what's your vision?
So this may be funny and odd to most, but I don't envision myself retiring. I would love to be a nomad because I love to travel and I want to see the world, and I want to continue working as either a consultant or doing speaking engagements or being involved in some of the incredible groups that I get to be a part of now, and interdisciplinary conversations with all kinds of incredible folks doing this work and connected to this work. And yeah, I have a real passion and zest for it. And I don't fully see myself retiring, but maybe doing different iterations of what this work looks like as my
Nice.
life goes on.
Nice, nice, nice. No, everybody has their own different picture, and I love it, love it. It's no, you don't ever, I don't ever hear I want to sit on the rocker chair on the porch, right? Yeah. That's really fun. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This is very fascinating. I love what you're doing, and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity to share a bit about me and what I do. I
Of
appreciate it.
course, of course. And thank everyone else for joining us. Again, I'm Regina McCann-Hess, president of Forge Wealth Management. You can follow me at forgewealth.com is our website. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Forge Wealth. On LinkedIn, Regina McCann-Hess. Go make it a great day. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Women in Wealth podcast. You can watch the founder's video I created for you to learn more about me and how I can guide you towards your financial independence at www.forgewealth.com. The information in this podcast is educational and general in nature and does not take into consideration the listener's personal circumstances. Therefore, it is not intended to be a substitute for specific, individualized financial, legal, or tax advice. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a final decision. Securities are offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA, and SIPC. Investment advice offered through Private Advisor Group, a registered investment advisor. Private Advisor Group and Forge Wealth Management are separate entities from the LPL Financial. Our show guests and their companies are not affiliated with nor endorsed by LPL Financial, Private Advisor Group, or Forge Wealth Management.